Geshe len long ma demba kunji mebe tupchi to miron asigdo. Geshe chirba to Geshe chera. Ente so ke kapchilia long ma demba ba. Len ma sung barwa. O len ma sung de ni chirba so ke godam bot saura ta sanjete kunji mare kanga shingi yo mare sra. Kares de Geshe len to ni len jamedwa sheza kanga shingi mebe tares. Sigora. Oh, they kunji member to Shimares len jagdwa.
So then we're on the third part here. If you look at the outline on page 313, you can see that it says, not answering 14 questions is no suitable proof for lack of omniscience. The Buddha was asked 14 different questions by non-Buddhists. He didn't answer, left them unanswered. And so then the non-Buddhists feel, oh, this is a reason or a proof showing that he didn't attain omniscience.
Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. Tende ko sanje chumden de ya kabri da yeba sungu yore. Kabri ya ta me ba sungu yora. Kabri ya da yore yo marestu lem masungba. Tende yung yora.
So the Buddha, sometimes he would say that the self exists. Sometimes he would say that the self doesn't exist, and sometimes he wouldn't answer whether somebody asked whether the self exists or doesn't exist.
Oh, tindu kasangashili ko ta yeba ne tuachipsi do ne tuachipsi ora. Tuachipsi tiriza ko karsi warsna. Ane jikdengi tayore yomare sigora. Mane tayore mere nigare nigamare bare kare sigora. Oh, tintagane shine kasore. Sanje chumdende kombanyangen den sigora. Tong penje den jungre jungmare nigare nigamare che chiwashi chera. 아니 지금데 딱바래 메다바래 니가래 니가 많이 바래 제 저시 지어라 중니체 되네 다다 류니 되시거라 제 지그레다 가가레스 저니체 저치시티라 텔레아테니 갑텔레 산제 저ting게텔레 마숭바레카 요르마르케 마숭리
So there were 14 questions. There's 3 sets of 4 and 1 set of 2. Here the first set of 4 is there he was asked, is there an end to the world? Is there no end to the world? Is there both an end and no end? Or is there neither or both? You can say it that way. And then is the world permanent, impermanent, both, or neither? And then, does the Buddha exist after his parinirvana, or not exist after his parinirvana, or both, or neither? And then, so that's the 3 sets of 4, and then the final set of 2 is the body and the self, what is it, one substance, or is it not one substance? So just those 2, making 14.
Sanje tele le masonra le mason ko akaresna ko tene jigdenge kansa de tayoresna meresna tayoresna o chiriba takba chibu rawa ta de yoba godam sanje ke kelling do samje takta pelru yora o de jigden tayo maresna jigden ronge kyochimate tesu kanga meresam dade sentimata sechimata meresam kolokda chigora Then, oh, Tagbata, Tindeda, Mare, Tension River Jones, some Jitende, Tagbeta, Yore, Tagbachibura, Dayo, Marese, Sumbe, Corneo, the Rongio, Marco, Hako, Tugi Mariti. Udin, the only Majora.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Right. So for instance, in the first set where he was asked whether, well, he didn't answer any of these. So then, when he didn't answer the first one about the world having an end or not having an end, he considered who was asking the question, this non-Buddhist person, and what it is that they, in particular, what their view was. So then he understood that this person had a view of this. If he said, yes, there is an end, then he would. Well, there is no end. If he said like that, then it would reinforce this permanent view they had of the self as enduring. And if they said there is an end, then because they held on to that permanent view so strongly, then they would have a nihilistic view that the self was completely destroyed. So then he thought, well, if I explain to them that that there isn't such a self that exists in a way of being permanent and unitary and independent, if I tell them that there is a self that is a dependent arising, then they won't be able to understand it. So they're not proper, what do I say, vessels or recipients for this kind of teaching. So then he didn't say that as well.
Nange chibetasi, chi pumbuti tolo neshiche, Dina lolia, Denge tashe, Oti nangi tasina, and de taba, Kadu Nangiwanga Mayoteran, Tanda the Mahobandonge, Juromenge Kona, Pumbutin Juramato, Sobul Juramato, Tan Juromenge, Taba, and it's Chibu, Baji Chan of Mambu Denge, Chashe Mambula, Tuition in the Komare, Kurajanga, Chibu, Chamiji Chibus. Chasan Chigme Chibusiora. And then Rawache, Ranjatuba, Kuran Netum get Tetumge. What in the taxi Rawache Tasigua, Nangichibe, Nangitibus Jesigua. What in the Jiko Yaba Kanga Diores, Shishachiora. What in the Sanje condition to Tambuta, Mass Shara. Dame Sundis or the Massungiora, Namjikons die said, Country Siguna Taxi Rawache Sigura. Oh, did this the Dio Mares, Dame Sun de Tiro. Tin the number Sanja Chitama, the condition, Taxi Rawache the Massigura. Yeah, diligent and Kashak in this whole Sanja Dame Sun Res, Chitane Dio Mares. Taxi Rawache dying and the Dio Mares. Tinde calling your Timarwa. Dioria. In a Consusea, Dadi Medu Dame, to your best to Tipato Yamar Consusamlunal Taxi Rawache and Nangichibe Tadirwa. Your best, oh, the Yomarita Yomares, the Timasungiora. Oh, I'll teach you later.
So, when the Buddha, well, at the time of the Buddha, when the Buddha came to India, there were a lot of different tenet systems, a lot of philosophical systems, and they all asserted this idea of a self that was permanent in the sense of that the body and mind are like a set of clothes, and the self is a permanent entity within there. It's the same self that came from the past, that's now in the present, and it will proceed into the future. So that kind of a static sense of self. And also they said it was unitary in the sense that it doesn't have any parts. It's just one single thing with a partless whole, we could say. And then also they had this idea that it was independent, that it didn't have to depend on anything else, just its existence. It existed in an independent way. Therefore, when the Buddha first gave the teaching of selflessness, he was refuting this view that was present in his disciples' what do you say, minds or experience. And so sort of culturally accepted view or something like that maybe. But anyway, and so some people might have misunderstood and said that he was completely negating the self. There wasn't any self at all. No, he was refuting that particular view of the self.
Oh yeah.
So the Vaibhashika and followers of that tenet system have this particular idea of selflessness. And aside from, and the other, of course, the other ones besides the Vaibhashika also say that such a self doesn't exist. This Dakchi Rawanjan means permanent, unitary, and independent.
Right.
Yeah, so they all agreed in this. This is a general tenet of all the different Buddhist tenet systems. So then when you look at the middle way or the Madhyamaka system, then they have a more subtle understanding of what the Buddha is saying when he said selflessness, and that the self didn't exist, and that is a self that doesn't exist from its own side. And I think that's, I prefer that translation. Some people say objectively existent self. The Buddha did have this teaching also where he said that there is a self that it's what do you say? I forget. I had a good translation for this, but I can't. It's an entity that's other than the aggregates, okay, other than the body and mind, and it carries the body and mind as if they're a burden. It's it's like the coolie who carries the burden of the aggregates. So how did he? Why is it that he had this self? That he did teach this, meaning of the self, is because that if he taught the selflessness to some disciples, they would just think that the self completely did not exist. So in order to avoid that, them falling into that extreme, he would teach this and then slowly lead them towards a understanding of selflessness.
Nangi chebe kibu ta yo re so kabri me so kabri yo ma yo kan le ma sung batinde yong do.
So then there's the Buddha in some instances would teach that there is a self that's sort of able to support itself, and sometimes he'd say there wasn't such a self, and then in other instances he wouldn't answer.
No. Oh, that the young guy de Sanjay Chumden de Naranzu Nashike Nashimara. Nazu any Pajo de Karakodo, Karasamgo Kahago Mara. Sosa Karahagonati Chibare Chigna Chikangal Sheshura. Sanjay could get the Pajo de Samu Karakodo, Tilamnako Karakosare, Tishana Karakosare, Hagu Kongiora, Tingiora. Tindo Kola Meva Shed Medusum, I'll call it Mevashana Kosandusam. Come the Samba Shirab said the Kenny, Nature Songiora. Oh, this somebody could doing the Sanjay Moy Nesung the Timber Song Shava, Capricorn Timber Song Shava, Tinder Yadi Yungiora, or Tang Dang Edens, Kansas, Kashasung Banashi Monayimba, Kelly Dringe, Kashasung Banashi, Dada Mange, Kelly and Medingit in the Yungudo. The young go at the Tiridua. Did you come the Sambal, Sigi, King and Tira? Aranzuni chairman of Karakuinako, so the Shimba Palab Shavamado, Pajukia, Quayamara.
The Buddha is not like us, okay? We sort of teach what we know, and then we have really no idea what each individual student is thinking or what their particular predisposition is, or disposition maybe for that. And so but on the other hand, a Buddha knows what everybody's thinking and what their predisposition is. He can see exactly what, how they're going to take what he says, okay? If he says, that the self doesn't exist, he knows that how that student is going to interpret also what he has said. So then we have all sorts of different sutras then where the Buddha is saying one thing, and it depends on what person he's talking to, and then he's saying another thing, and so in order to sort of come to understand what these sutras are indicating, then we have to divide them into where the Buddha is talking provisionally and he's talking definitively. If we can take the Buddha exactly at his word, then it's definitive. Well, the definitive and this is what the Buddha is really teaching, and then interpretable or provisional is what we have to, where we have to take it in a different way.
Oh yeah. Indiko chitama da dodibato tambu tesuke sanje sung sama ngedun jang sigora. Tangde yo mare sigora. Tindi sanje sung shaba shirjeng do chutam jetembar me rangune me sung sheng do sanje kamare sigwa yongora. Dilabgiara.
So then the first two, or the lower tenet systems, the so-called lower tenet systems, the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika, then they interpret, they take the Buddha's teachings literally, and when it comes to teachings like and so everything is definitive, and then they don't have this idea of interpretable, and so then when they come upon sutras like the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, for instance, then they simply say that that's not the Buddha's word.
Dame kaza dameda dunge tong dame demba shi de so ma do ani chiru tan de truba mare sitin de so yo mare modele tene chitra ma dan do de ba to so chiru tan de truba yore ma do mere so yo mare yo ba so go ra chetam je rang chingi ji yore chiru tan de truba yore se so go yore de so de tele tene ko chitra ma ge dan do de ba tu de ding go ra de mani ste ma chiru ji tan yo ba chetam je rang chingi ji yo ba.
Well, so then in the first turning of the wheel, the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths in such a way that he said that the self and so the self exists by way of its own self-characteristics, and so then he didn't say that it didn't exist in such a way, and he also didn't teach that it didn't that external what can we say there is such a that things exist externally. He didn't have this teaching that there was no external existence. So. These kinds of so in that explanation he was teaching to the people that had this view like the of the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika.
Yeah, ta kolo parba sundu shirjeng do sigra. Shiro ki paru chimbe do shiro nyimbu dambum de tsra. O de ka bu chödam ja rang chenyi ki me. Dambar me. Thong na shinga ju thong na shi ta da dambar mare. Rang tende son yora. O dele tene ko uma betu da tiongu do.
So in the second turning of the wheel is where he gave the teachings that the self was did not exist by way of its own self-characteristics and was not truly existent and therefore did not exist. Sorry, there's a third one, but anyway, truly and not did not exist by its own from its own side, you can say. Then or did not exist in its own right. So then those teachings were given to those who had the Madhyamaka viewpoint.
Da kolo tame kapso ene kasore chiruji shuidozo rangchenyi yomare nange shebade rangchenyi tukuri tamba tukuri esera chiru yomare shebadozo tembar yore ese che kashe tembar yore kashe tembar mevres sungu yora deletene simzambe tukda tingora.
So the third turning or final turning of the wheel is where he taught gave teachings that are for the people who had this view of the Chittamatra, where he said that things did not exist externally, that they had that they existed by that the mind itself had existed truly or by way of its own self-characteristics, and he also divided phenomena into certain classifications in which some existed by way of their own self-characteristics and some didn't exist by way of their own self-characteristics.
samlo kande korto udo kande samlo korto udo kola karishena takta chigdo tina shinche jene rimbero kashe songa de tira ngarazu samlo tando sanje sungba changma tamjede sosu kelen kwa yo maro pen chidasgida sosu kare lol takdando chidama se takdando dodeba se takda semjambade umaba kare sosu lol gawe na sosu lol chigina odi yagudo sanja tele nyamni chen paase ya do yora odi la
so the Buddha was teaching in a gradual way from a less refined view to a more refined view of selflessness, and so then you get this differentiation of the Vaibhashika, the Sautrantika, then the Chittamatra, then the Madhyamaka being the most refined view. So then, we can't take all of those somehow and adopt all of those as our particular view. We have to just sort of look at them and see what is it amongst these that sort of we feel the most most comfortable with, and then work on from that point to refining our view.
Ko sanje chundamda kabri su mes kare na samna o didi agogorwa tuje kamda sambana shi chusongyores chushinba mambo sosolo ta timba mambo yongyore tigres wa o dindi dina yudo chidan nebalas neba de mid neba de nasa kandres ndaga yona memba to koran temba jige ni men tangirwa mato men de yakshu ins men chik de sangmal tang me do asere tina shin jira chidar nebalas neba nawatel sora memba men na naga janda nazo na shin de men dramda tangire sora sanje de je semjan la chizam sobe chodan dos sanje ge chotsun yatia tuje de ko lolya kaze sobe to kolkare pento chedo ne Dapulia did then any choose on Giora. This was a tricky Pungudameter, you had to teach an Yongiora.
The important thing is to understand that the Buddha taught in a way that was attuned to each person's disposition and ways of thinking. So, so then when he taught them, and when he would understand, and so there comes out a difference, many differences, and according to the differences amongst people's ways of thinking and dispositions. And so then it's said that the Buddha did this just like a physician who takes a look at his or her patient's illness, and then applies a medicine that's appropriate to that illness. And it wouldn't be a very good physician just to give the same medicine to everyone. Okay, so then the Buddha taught, and that's how the Buddha taught.
Chidama Nangshin Kele, teaching that to the Kemalena, Nangura deora, Koran Lol Suji Kelling Giora. Oh, that teaching in a Koyan, teaching the Sanga Zero to the Kemele, Tibachimbu Koran Kelembeina, Ako Chuna Quata Giomarwa, Pe Maris Giomarwa, Tangata that it out and do some Kelena, Diora. Dina she go Kibuchungina. Tarvada Tamjakim Batazu, Toya Samloke Kogmara, or Kiwachimalada Miko Bantoguye, Titan Dalia Mikuachupan, Kiwachu to Sawapang, Pembatoguye, Samne, Jenna Diora, Tarva Tamjakim Bake Hamaguna, Kitimidwa. Then go Tarva to Korandile, Targo some Tilum with no, Yena, any quality Tarvichidum Midabata, that time ever Pongban you said Tomatos Keshengura. Teacher, Tamjakim Bato, Tebachimbuina, Tinashikoya, Sajusim Betabasungudua. Sakoso Kare, Yamsulanti, Yamsulani, Diora. And the Avochos and Damada to Saldera. Oh, yeah.
So we can take the teachings according to what it is that that we feel, comfortable with. And the Buddha had these this great variety of teachings. So we can look at all these teachings in various levels of spiritual progress, and so that when you're on the first level and you're then at that level you're thinking of avoiding the miserable realms and having a fortunate rebirth, and simply avoiding any harm towards others. Then that there doesn't have to be any consideration at that point of both liberation and omniscience. It's really you don't you can't really say, well, that person isn't practicing Buddhism or something like that, and if they're not trying to become a Buddha, that person at that level, the Buddha has teachings for that level of practice, and then once that person has reached, sort of brought that level to its end, then at that point they're ready to consider moving to the next level, which would be to consider that all of cyclic existence is to be abandoned and to leave cyclic existence, and so then they can engage in the practices at the level of striving for liberation. And once you bring that level to its completion, then at that time the person is ready to bring into his or her practice the goal of omniscience, and so then they enter into the practices of the Mahayana and the Bodhisattva practices to become a Buddha.
Oh yeah. Thank you. 다단 지된 타요래 요마스 단단한 조치시바 오 된데 네 조치시 랜 담메 주가스네 랜데 송요 마레스거라 담메 주베시레 탐제 캠바 멤버 규라 미남 셰나세 오 데니 조치요라 고드니 산제티 탐제 캠바 마레세 조치시들 랜 잠도아세 되시기도아 오 데니 텔파레 잔 데니 꾸인지 멤버 줍지든 규어 멤버 마세 꾸인지도 줍지든 규르게레서 어디 Lema Sumbade, Kunji Sanje Chumdende, Kunji Membe, Jusen Mares, Tinduk Mare, Kunji Imbe Jusen Dugres, Tishegdwa. Oh, did you love?
So if we return to our text on page 135, we're on the verse 103. The assertion here then is, surely he lacked omniscience, since he did not answer 14 questions such as whether the self and the world are permanent or impermanent and so forth. So we have the assertion that he didn't have omniscience because he didn't answer these questions. So then the rejoinder here is, rather than disproving, it establishes his omniscience.
Oh yeah, that is sure. Tulan Zedan Zemi danse, Sunja Mengawa, Tene Kunji ni Mishichala Juchi Yose, Turasanje Chumden de Liako, Tujelia, Tene Zeban Zeguya Carrere, Sunguya Carrere, Tujetil Carisungodo, Carisung and Digimendo, Sunja, Maimba Sama, de Kembe Tungagi or Segura, Tungawa, Sigura, Sunja Mingawas, Kembe Tengagi or Segura. No. Tena Kunjin ni Mishi Chala Juchi Yose. Jusen de Chena, Kunjin de Sanje Chumden de Kunjin Mare, and a land Jamando Sade, Kunjin Mimbe Jusen like Condition to Dos Yora. Tena Kunjin ni Mishi Chala Juchi Yose, Jusen Chi de Joa Marese. The land they cup the Duchet de Coson and Dig me, but the King is on land of Gio Marese. Oh, this.
So a subduer has perception or knowledge, perhaps we can say, of that which should or should not be done or said. What reason is to say that the omniscient one is not all-knowing? So here, the Buddha is somebody who has just can know or perceive what a person, what should be said to this person or what shouldn't be said to this person, and as we were saying. So then, where is it that you can say that a Buddha is not omniscient, is not all-knowing?
Yes, sir. That David Logida. Kange Chirnas, Jusen Kange Chirnas, Tuba Las, Tuba Sanje Chumdendela, Negab Dance, Tardu Jin Zebetuda, Negab Kolkare Shakudo, Karin Zakudo, and the Chesu Tardene, Rim Gishenda Karaka Sungu, Tesu Kanga de Tuda Tumaiba Kanga Chingi or Esgora, Negab Tardu Jin Zebe Tuda, Sanje and Zeba Zeba, Sunkoya Kari, Masunkoya Karinkar, Tuda Tumimba, Zebar Chawa, Mepembada. Kola Tinde Zeba Yinayan, Zeba and Zebam, Sumba Yinaya, Pendo Meba, Roa, and then Neve, Dangiri Cuba, Tezum Mesumbada. Ya Pendo Yovach in any Captilia Sungi of Asgora. Mepembada, Nebada, Sunja Tada, Musum do 6 inse, Sunja Mimbayang, Musum do 6 base. Sungoya Kari, Captilla Tuja de la Negab, Tadu Rimbecarson, Sumbago Karakanga, Kingi or Resera, Musum do 6 base, Sigbangawa in BS. Land long Madame Banes, or this on the Cap de Trevab Tingi Kansa till the land long to Madame Batenes Gora. Kansa and Shaggy Tale, some netro in Bequet to what de Kansa Papa Chiburan or Yoba. Or Tendeko Shishach and the Kansa and the Kansa long church to those to what you are Resgora. Tell some Lutan to what you are Resgora. Kansa that Shaggy Tale, some netro in Be. Keshi Kakbe Keshus or Mirun Shese. Oh, then Keshi the Baka, and any casual long time Yomarwa, or Keshi did and then a Kotish Shaji to do any Tiora Sonet Tel Kugiora Marasonet Chidan and Mabel Conduora. Oh, Kakbe Keju Mirun said, Tame Batana, some will to Mirun or Signes, Tata Yomarese, or sooner Tami Tempe Samu de Tempe no to Mirun Ares. O this was a Lundu Madame Beres, Miruas in the land Lundu Madame Batena. No, down there, my Batada Musum do Sigbe, Quindini, Mishi Chavala Chuzin, Chiu de Mela. O de Lama Sumbade, Quindi Membe Jusen Ruma Resora. Then a Quindi Imbe Jusen to Jura Yenos, the Quindi Imbe Jusen to Jurgresura. No, did you lot?
So the commentary then proceeds. A subduer directly perceives, okay, he has direct experience. What is the right or wrong time for his temporary and ultimate actions? What actions should not be done? What is not beneficial? What is harmful? As well as all that should or should not be said. So the Buddha has this kind of knowledge that if he says that the self exists, then that would be helpful to the person, or it would not be helpful, and so he wouldn't say that, and he'd say the self doesn't exist. And so that the Buddha had such a knowledge that it was directly perceived. It means that he had that direct experience of what it was that needed to be said. So then, since the Buddha possessed such perception, he did not give an answer to these questions. which were based on a belief in the true existence of persons and phenomena. So he understood that in the case of these 14 questions, that the person who was, or the persons that were asking these 14 questions had this strong belief in the true existence of persons and phenomena, and so it wouldn't be feasible to answer them because it is not feasible for a basis of attribution whose existence has been negated to have an attribute. He did not answer because he saw that they would not be receptive vessels for the profound were he to teach selflessness. So he couldn't teach them that how the self does not exist, and in what sense it does exist. They just weren't proper vessels for such a teaching. Thus, there is no reason to say that the omniscient one is not all-knowing. In fact, or indeed, this substantiates his omniscience, that in fact he was omniscient. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Lama sumba de kunji mimbe kyusen rugu mare, kunji yimbe kyusen rugu res, renjin chama long tang dwa. Jigden tadan denam she se, jigden ge ne tadan den greve se, shu na, jawe misung shu sa, ke ma sumba che, lama sumba che shu bara. Kanjir dedar sabe ne, numin dola misung ba se, kyusen kange che na, yo mare sung sha ne, samu tongba nye, dame ba chamu tengure, di kol tembe ne do rungu yo mare tanda. Tanda pendo yungbu mareba. Kanji tedar sabe che numin dola mesumba. Te chena ke namji kunji tamji kembershes. Okyuzen te chena keba namji kunji sanje chumden dedi kunji imbade she togurese. Tuje kamda samba sungja kare sungja maimba kare kadu songu mare kanga chingi yuzan te sungba kapchila sungu yore dame sungu yore tongbani sungu yore pasajila sungu yore mare ote kunji yimbe kyusen yimba she togurese keba namji sita sungda.
So this quote from the Precious Garland is proving, is taking off from that idea that it's not that he wasn't omniscient. In fact, it substantiates his omniscience. So then Nagarjuna says, asked whether it had an end, the conqueror was silent, because he did not give this profound teaching to worldly beings who were not receptive vessels, as the teaching of selflessness then. The all-knowing one is therefore known as omniscient by the wise. So then instead he had this ability to, in some instances, say that the self exists, some say that it doesn't exist, and other instances say that it doesn't exist, and then in certain existence he would just remain silent and not ask whether, and not answer whether the self exists or didn't exist.
Eso? Oya, ni kara. Oda de petero. Sanje chumde de Thabkhe barese. Kare songudo changma pe Thabkhe barese. O de imbe pete shegdo. Pena gebun gashi tamsin jorba chen chebe chen debe sedo. Gebu de ne tamse chubu kyagali ne tamse tinde chubu yora. O tinde chubu tinde silya ko cheba si kyagudo sam ko chubu re peshambu. Lengudo sam kong samne sigara. Kyeji kimna chumban dogbe nyurdo tongshi 대다 메나 제발은 주로 셰메바다 결혼 강변하리야 톰바지도 와서 톰바하고라 출인도 같은 데서라 톰바진도 와서 자갈디 칼세 강변나로로 톰바 용도 와 그걸 톰바스 네 출렌 쳐줘셔네 답장티 되체 dinner래 용도 와 내가 dinner서 시기라 결혼 강변날 톰바지도 와 띵난줄 거기에 동쇼스 디만에 결혼 셰바체긴 셔라 다고 톰바다 두 말에 아니 셰바체고 배샤 먹으실랭 거 삼제 디셔라 걔네 매바다 잠세 pomete tramse de semde jurda tomba countries pa jagando de ta jebu cheba jagre semde chora te tramse pomu chora de o de ke chig ma de ta len chi jab gure se labje ne tramse pomu nor gog ba shindo se jigden le pa chi robo cheb tes ne chule nor tele chech te yora se o de na shi chene nor gog ba shindo tomba shen shi nga zelo tomba shen da je robo chu tang ro na se ene tomba de nyam do salpa Pugins, Lanjabs Tare, Teneco, Jabuki, Lam Machine, but what the Thabkhe Chongres, Yara. Oh, but Salo Shebe, Thabji, Cheba that Jawashin, do Sanja, Thabkhe and Droet, or the Thabkhe Chongres, Yara, who didn't Sanja here to jet the Thabkhe on the Kanga can that they won't give you a reason.
So the example is of the analogy here is of skillful means, and so a certain king wanted to penalize a rich Brahmin, told him that he would be punished unless he quickly sent his family's well. Some of the Brahmins are very wealthy, so the king is saying that oh, he could make some money for his coffers if he punished this very wealthy Brahmin, and so he thought, well, I'll just be very clever here and do something that he couldn't possibly do. But some Brahmins actually, the wealthy, would make their wells in the house, so then they could just draw the water and have it right there for their kitchen. And so it was probably like that. So it was like the Brahmin probably just became totally unable to think of what to do because he probably got so worried about it. But the Brahmin's daughter had a little longer way of looking at things, and so she replied, "Wealth attracts wealth, and please send us a well." So in the world, if you have wealth, then it attracts wealth. So her idea is, okay, so send us a well, and then we'll just send 2 wells to you, and so then it seems that the king had no way of replying to this request, and so then in this way they avoided punishment from the king, and similarly, a Buddha acts for the welfare of sentient beings by skillful means. The Buddha knows exactly how to deal with each individual.
No, yeah. That didn't do what they are. Get the Sonja member, Miss Nase, Sonja Maimba, the Songi Mares, Sarah, and Teleaco, Sabatuyora, Tokakuyora. Sanja Jum then the Sonja Maimba Songi Mana, Hezin Liane. Sometimes the Capsulia, then Legend the Abumares says a marathon to us, Yora. Oh, the end Sonja Maimba Songbara call a Dujares Sona, Mandibra Yora. Legend let some the Kudum Janjepu, Chilsemba, Chi, Shesumba Minam Shena, Song Mejetene, Shana, Nebaya, Mila, Tibal and Dog Veshedo Songba was it. Legend the Masona called Tiba Mambo. Saya Yanga Sigura, Tesson Legend, Yama Pavetundala, men in Sungbare Sigura. Shella Neveche to Mares, Kobe, Kutiba Mabusagre, Cone, Tenema, Tiba Masana Conoma, never number Sigura. There's a legend, Mapapa Manzana, draw Mambula. Never Chambunjora, Sibes also, what in the scene any Sumbarese, Sunja Maimba, Sumba Mares, and Aranzu Michel Contrasen, Tujalava Mares, and
So, there's another retort here. If the Buddha does not say what should not be said, did he not say, referring to Devadatta, what of this boy who wears one piece of cloth and has taken the bait? Which is very kind of, well, the question is thinking, the Buddha is like us, and just sort of say something nasty, and that seems very inappropriate. So didn't he say that? It seems very inappropriate, and so but although he in fact did say this, it was not to harm others, but to turn them away from ill deeds. He saw that Devadatta was going to be involved in a lot of, getting a lot of, what do you say, non-virtuous karma. Okay, so then he decided to say this, and it was a skillful way of preventing him from accumulating all this bad karma. He saw that unless he deflated Devadatta, many transmigrators would be harmed. So he had to, like, what do you say, denigrate Devadatta, and in order to deflate him so that it wouldn't be harmful to many others. So it wasn't that the Buddha's just like us, just sort of saying something nasty. It had some intention, helpful intention. Well,
no, yeah. That didn't come. Oh, that did chilam nada. Kusanje Devadatta de Sanje Kumjiri doye, Pinjari doa. Kusanje Dendu Shaji Chajane Sanje Sumba Maris Shasha. Sanje Jumde de Koranchi Yabura Chonso, de Chichi Yungri Yabu Yungri Chichi Sonja, Sanje Yabu Maris, Na, the Koranasi Lagba Yosje, Lagwaris Dendu Chetekwa. And these the Coco at the Kanga Maris to Shaji Sanje Pepe Tron to the Troya that in the Chicago. When he now called Sanje Unichon Marwa, Sanje Uniqueta Marwa. What do you indico Narazut in the Yora? Can never in the Michambut and Lamachambut in the Richinaco, oh, the young woman, the Chichi City. Project you never gave Omara. Project the Cotado than I get a Michibangi Yungo.
So, Devadatta was actually a relative of the Buddha, but he always had a very competitive feeling. He was always trying to best the Buddha, and he was always anything the Buddha said, he would say the opposite. That Buddha doesn't know what he's talking about, and he was always trying to one up the Buddha, and he was also he was. In some situations, he would try to kill the Buddha, and it was just like he was constantly seeing faults in the Buddha, and so. But that's the way it is for us as well. That even though somebody might see faults in another person, it's not necessarily coming from. It's not necessarily true that that person has faults. It can easily be coming from the other person because that person is subject to a lot of pride or competitiveness or jealousy and so forth, something like that.
Oh yeah, 당연히 되리도. 톱제 상계지 쳐왔던 바스 이게 되리야 쳐왔던 이바들이야. 근데 대주 전주선 배초반 냠솔은 배수셔봐서도 되려요라. 슝기된 셔바들이야 sabje shire shesonga. 톱제 레부 상계지 쳐왔던 바스. 다 대주 전주선 배초반 냠솔은 수셔봐 이바들이도 되셔도.
So now we're done with showing the greatness of Buddhahood, the resultant attainment, and now moving on to the second part where it's explaining how to practice bodhisattva deeds, the cause of Buddhahood.
Oh yeah, that nibate you chanju sembe choba nyamso linzu shebala sum segdoa chanju sembe choba nyamso linzu di shegdoa. No. Oh, tanzenda sum kone shegdoa. Choba la lobe kulungi chabar chanju sembe choba paru sembe tulo lobe kulung kante che yodes. Sem gebe sonam da ni chanju sembe to sem gebalia sem sangbo. Dende kebala sonam karisa gre kewa kande penyo kande yongrisera. Ni choba la lobe kante lobe yores tanzenda sum di chungodoa.
So then we have this second part explaining how to practice the bodhisattva deeds, the cause of Buddhahood, and it's divided into 3 different sections. One section called special features of motivation for training in these deeds, showing the motivation of the bodhisattvas when they undertake the 6 perfections and so forth. And then merit of the second section is merit of generating the altruistic intention, and finally the actual mode of training in the deeds. Well,
oh yeah, that didn't do. Oh, that job and Yamsulin to the Sum de Doa. Niba de Juchus and Bechova Yamsulin to the Chobala Lobe Kulungi Chabarchero. Sem Gibeson, didn't do Sarva. That Ambu Chobala Lobe Kulun de la Nira Shegdoa. Ni Kosum Ginan, the Yitso transgender Tambada. Shana Miki and Jurue, Chanju Samba Namlea, Sambe Wangi Kelly to Juruas, Tanzania on the Shegdoa. Kulun delia.
And so the motivation for training in these deeds has 2 different sections to it, and showing the mind as the principle of the 3 doors, body, speech, and mind, and showing how even that which is non-virtuous in others becomes supremely virtuous in bodhisattvas by the power of their attitude.
Yeah. Takosum Jinane Yidito, Lunga Yisum Jinane, Yidito Resegura. Oh, Tito in Batishegua.
So then, amongst the physical, verbal, or mental actions then of a bodhisattva, then we're talking about how the mind is the foremost.
Kunlo Samki Karisam in a Tinashani, Ludanga, Chawanibute, Samge Nikarsam the teachers and the teacher Remado Kuniti, Ramacheke Omardo.
This comes from the fact that our verbal and our physical and verbal actions are always going to follow our thought. We have to. They can't act independent. We can't act physically and verbally independent of thought. So then the mind is felt to be foremost or paramount.
That's how it is. Sema toban drosola, kanjir sunam la soba. Madon teacher lekun la yini tembu trubacha sigwa. Sema toban drosola se. Kosum dane yiso to giordo. Kulungi sem disgora, Kulungi sem de Kawada, Mikiwale Madobe, any on Droada, on Geshe, la soba Ludanga, Cheba Kangatelia, any Karsere, Kulu, Kawada Miki, Samluti, Wangi, and then Droada, Mawala soba, Lunga, Cheba to Kanga de Tiregres, Dwakarsure. Sonam da, Kawada Miki and Jurgu Rescura. Sema dogman drosola, Kanjir Sonam Lasoba, Matonse. Tishere, Maton Tishere, Yini Temple Trubachas. Was a Lunga, let some Matamja delia, Kawada Miki and Jurede, so ye did Wangi Yungu Rese. What did you love?
So without, the verse says, without intention, actions like going are not seen to have merit, and so forth. In all actions, therefore, the mind should be understood as paramount. So without having some thought or intention or the mind, some action of the mind, then any kind of action, physical or verbal actions like going physically or speaking verbally, all these are not seen to have merit, and so forth. There will be either result in merit or result in some kind of negativity based on whether or what is the intention, what is the quality of the mind. So in all actions, therefore, the mind should be understood as paramount. We're talking intention or mind here.
Oh yeah, they don't jabadra. Kosum de lekun las lunga yesum gi chawa condition at las yara. And the yini tambur de yidi to de so res gora ye de so tupcha res gora oh tene kares ne ye gewe wange lunga ge chawa chungsu ne geware ye me gewa chena ene me geware lunga chawa ye loma de do res gora kange chena kunlong ge sem ke me ge wando madok bar kunlong ge sem gewe wange kunne lang be lunga ge chawa me gewa wange kunne lang be lunga ge chawa se te gewa me gewa jura mados gora wang do amado ba Doa down la soba sunam dan sunam maimba so maton yese. Doa down la ya kewa dan meke wa seje yo mares gora. Pande kulun kewa ke wan ke chene drosona. Komba jem do na moda na do na chilla ga sangbu che tandalia. Mila pando tuwe chi tandando ko kewa resora. An doa chi ba yena ko chi de medelia doja kare ji ga go ya bu lab go sam moda dan du na ko moda dan ke chi de gewara. Chi ge jawa de meke wa resora. Moda na doja chi ba ko ni joba tele chen du yora. Ye komba jem du ne chi ba wa. Da na ji khane ke ji chi ba chi ya kiran pe ya bu do ya bu shi da res. Mil tebate na chide ngone ra ko samne tebate chide kol tebate ngo go sitango samne chevene ko chik baro lu danga ga chawa chik baro ina ke chik hore chi me ke hore ndu do de gar sne kulong go angare sa yara
So we're really looking at what the motivation behind actions are, and so mind should be understood as paramount or foremost in all activities of the three doors. Whether it's means any kind of activity of physical, verbal, or mental activity. So then, that it's the mental activity that it's the intention then that is foremost. This is because actions like coming and going are not seen to be meritorious or demeritorious except through the power of the virtuous or non-virtuous intention motivating them. So we can be jumping in the car to go do something that's helpful to living beings, to someone, or to go to help someone, and then so that action of driving off in the car or walking to get wherever we're going, in order to do that action would then be virtuous, and then whereas if we jumped into the car to go, to hurt someone, to do something non-virtuous, then that action of going into the car or taking a walk, using your own power to walk, that would be non-virtuous. So it's entirely dependent upon what our intention is. And for instance, somebody might say sincerely to praise someone, and then that and then that sincere intention and praise, that action would then be virtuous. Whereas if the same person, well, the same action of praising could be done with a different intention in order to deceive this person and inflate them and then mislead them and so forth. So that intention being non-virtuous, then the same action of praising would be non-virtuous or demeritorious.
Yeah. Doing a job and Sanjay change some to the sorry by the local songudwa. Sorry, but sorry, but a local race, caress, makes the negap kokopkaya, negap. Tanda Kuya Tessa, Tap Danchi, Koya Yorwa, or Desukan, and the sorry, but local race on Gudwa, some Bukapshin and the Desocean and the Kanga, Lega Karishin and Milkoya Kangashin, Pendo Yora, still a local race. And the Tana Shingi. Men le logo res lo jache wor kares ne mit serang bu yoyada nega lu tebo yoya tendel pendo yongu res ro o tin she ko darik ba lo lopjon che gore Geshe she to pa ya bu she to mil laptum na tanda mang bu ko ya pendo yo res tin she tenzi ri ba se ti jang mari sik jang sam ma da ri ba ti be chu sen di re men be chu sen de se ri be tak je che ne ko ne lang dor che ya de Sulanguya Kare, Torcha Kare, Chetuka Kashima, River Samlotane. Tagas Michi Labgisi, Mixon Machache, River Samlotan, Sosu Taxation, Chegore, Samaric Balogore, and the Sosu Symbion Duechedo, Nangasem Duechedo, Nandu Ribal Logores. Chinaco, Nangbachiginako, Suzukulo, the Aguchiana. Oh, yes, some jet or pendo, you could some journey, so that not their legacy Chabinaco, changes and Beladua. Changes and Belashimba, you have in the Mambudua. Then as a song jam get changes and one younger Napias, changes and Bangapia, Michi Setro Chandinico, Bajudi Kumati Sabelo Yungudua. That song young in under, so then the legacy again under Lega Carriage again, Combe legacy and the changes and Bechable and Dragora. Kunusona. Some jet and Sanjay go on Tovercha, some jelly pember to some jet to Tunga negative to sell with some changes some Simbe, only changes and Bechavar soda. Oh, then the members are not that Legacheco, Bechata Sawi, Matos Cold Pen and Mother and some 7 o'clock or make your carry Marva. The Coculunguange. Teach you Nangburg down a Shichigina. Miller Koyaji Madu Mego, Legacy, Yoma, Lega Carchana. Milazate the Colquazico Yora, Tal Menderas, Edambambrason and Kashi Madora, Nangbaga Dawadi, Tazukangate, Ludanga, Lega Kangade, Koranshi, Kiwake Yomara, Semki Kunu sang and one kiki on the Guda.
So it's, whatever we're doing, this indicates that in fact, we could be engaging in any activity short of making arms for destroying people that would then be, we could make that into a activity, whatever work we do, we can make that into an activity that is a bodhisattva practice because of our intention. Any kind of work is, I mean, we get money for doing the work, but it's the work itself, whether it's working for the monastery or doing factory work or whatever it might be, is because people need that. And so then if you then have the right motivation when you're doing that, then it goes as a bodhisattva practice. As bodhisattvas have to learn 5 areas of expertise or something like that, where they, for instance, they have to learn crafts or to be an artisan because people need seats to sit on and houses to live in, and so then they engage in studying that so that they can provide that for others. And then they also learn medicine because to help people live a long life and to live a fruitful life, and with intention to help them in that way. And they also learn grammar so that they can speak well, so that people can that they can communicate well and
Sigla Truba Pambish Suda. Sigla Truba Pambish to Tariba. Don't let Truba Pambish to Samariba Suda.
So that they can be skilled in how they say things, okay, or write things for that matter. And then so that they can be skilled in the meaning of what they write or say, then they have to study the 4th area would be logic, so that they can distinguish what is correct, what is to be taken up, and what is to be cast aside, or adopted and cast aside. That they can make that clear distinction, and then. Finally, then also there's Buddhist teachings. Then is so that they can know how to tame the mind or discipline their mind, so then a bodhisattva learns these areas with the intention of being helpful to others. So then. In the same way, we can, whatever activity, whatever work that we are, it can become a bodhisattva activity based upon what our intention is while we're doing that work.
Oh, yeah. That did that in a penna, then the pedere do a pe. Jabba the loss are in ba.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, penna, Chibuba, she lagan the shoe, the Kusu Chilla Chacello. Shela, or go regular chebe, the Dada, Kewada, Miguel, Eurasian, no Sida. Chibuba and Jen, the Suchi and Donco, Lakashel, Kushep Chetija, Lakashel, Kushep Machepse, in the Stotolo to Chija Chimbena, Chigdelea, Kunu Sangusa, Pen Younger, Chigdeletic by Younger Esora. Sam Giwanko.
So then, in this example, then, it says a naked ascetic entered a temple and prostrated to one statue while touching another with his posterior, thereby creating virtue as well as an ill deed. It sort of, I don't know, this translation probably doesn't quite work. The way Geshe is explaining it, that he actually didn't, you know, he wanted to he wanted to express, you know, actually express some respect to one of the statues, and he actually wanted to be disrespectful to the other one. So it wasn't like he mistakenly, you know, he was just, you know, showing his butt to one and his head to the other. Yeah. So anyway, so then in the one case, his intention was created virtue, and the other one it created an ill deed.
And this one.
Last reason.
Tanibashana Mikewa Juroyan Chanju Sembala Sambe Wange, Kelesu Juroasidwa. Tandangazude, Tama de la Subject Nichonswa. Cheba Kulun Cheba Karsa. Kosum Jikone Yitso Cherva. Shana Mikewa Juyan Chanju Sembala Kelesu Juroasidwa. Niba Shella Mikewa Juyan Chanju Sembala Keleshelia Kansa Kashelko Chawati. Miguel Regina, Chanju Sembala, Kevare, your rest. Gares no Kulungang, your rest, Sarah.
So the next section is where we're showing how even that which is non-virtuous in others becomes supremely virtuous in bodhisattvas by the power of their attitude. So it's really talking about, something that normally would be, for ordinary persons, non-virtuous, would become virtuous based upon the bodhisattva's pure attitude, pure motivation.
Sambe Chanju Sembala, Kiamu and the Migan Ronse. Sambe Wangi, Yi Kunu, Sangbe Wangi, Chanju Sembalaya, Parsura, Chitam Mille Kiam, Miguel and Jurki Yona Yansigora. Chanju Sembalayatene, Kunu Give Wangi, Shan Miguel and Juratozoako, Kevan and Jurtogura, Kevan Jueta, the Kevan Jutigo. Shan Gashil and Miguel and Jurget to Chanju Samba Kunu, Sangbe Wangi, telling Jun to Zako, Kevan to Yoresora. Kamja Gelin, Juti, Council Yidi Wang Jurges. Chanju Samba Zaya, Lunga, Chawa to Pachatane, Shambangi, Chawa, Kevan Bashil to Yoresora. Goddess no ko Yidi, Shandun. Thabkhe Shanche Bada Shan la Pemba Druban Bashi, never pon Bashi Chiduko, Yi de Te Shaman to Curbare Sigua.
So, because it's Sikje doing God.
Oh, Sikje to love in Bangetanda. Some Bechanju Sembala Kamu and the Mekiros. Tamja Kelenia, you the Kanji Yidi Wangir Chirsiamba. Sikje Robs.
So, in bodhisattvas, through the verse here, 105, is in bodhisattvas, through their intention, all actions, virtuous and non-virtuous, become perfect virtue because they are in control of their minds. So, since we established in the previous verse that since the mind is foremost in all activities, virtuous actions such as giving and even such actions as killing which in others would be non-virtuous, all become perfect virtues in bodhisattvas who are in control of their minds. Because of their motivation to help others. The bodhisattvas have exchanged their view of being preoccupied with one. We're like ourselves. We're preoccupied with ourselves. They're totally preoccupied with others. So then, it's due to this intention of only being helpful to others that then what would normally be considered non-virtuous could be considered would become virtuous.
No, don't jabba the log yuda. Shala pembe sambe kune langbe sikdo shala pembe sambe kune langbe. Semla wang tobe chanju semba laswe. Shala pensem ye kune lamne semla ya rawa toba resigora. Ngazo ne semla rawa ma toba sem nyemo ge shawan de jur kondri shawan de jur trado ge shawan de jurwa. Chanju semba tende jur ma jubiche shembe ge samlu shawan de jurchu. Kewe samlu shawan de jur mege samlu shawan de jur chu yo marwa. Ode Shala pembe sambe kune lambe semla wang tobe chanju sembala chinso kewam chimbala soba kewa tuzude kewa yimbeche soju so shala mikiwar juwa ya mi so chebala soba chidan milia mikiwar jura yina ya chanju sembala ya soju bala soba tende chunga yina ko kewa lan juju ya resi gewara mikiwar jura ya rung chanju sembatela tamje gele nidun jura dese Gange chena karchen rugu yaresana Gange chena yi chidar dwe bashin miki wala minjuji chanju semba tozo sosu chidar dwe bashin do yi di miki we shen wando shen la kondu da nga jeda chado do tende wando ruma resu wara Gange resana kewe shen bengi samlu shen wando juba resu wara Gange chena yi chidar dwe bashin miki wala minjushin kewa la jugba te wando jube cheso sosu sem de chanju semba lea miki we shen wando majure she ane kewe shen wando jurde shenbenga samlu shen wando jurde res tesu da ko kari che na lega sukunu sangbu chigi sheji chigri mado shen la neba da tsawa tende yungu yo ma resung da
So that was again, I was actually just explaining the verse, so then to go over the commentary again, that virtuous actions then, such as giving and and even such actions as killing, which in others would be non-virtuous, all become virtue in the bodhisattvas who are in control of their minds. When we say in control of their minds, it means that they're not like us, that they're not under the control of like we are of our anger and our jealousy and our pride. They don't have that kind of problem. That they are actually in control of their minds. They're not under the influence of their affliction. So that then their motivation is they've been able to change their motivation so that it's not like us, so preoccupied with ourselves, but just preoccupied with others. And so then, and then once they don't have this preoccupation with their with themselves, and once they have this preoccupation with being of benefit to others, then they and it's because they have gained the ability to engage in virtue at will and not to engage in non-virtue. Once they're not under the influence of their afflictive emotions or their afflictions, then they're engaging in virtue at will, and they never have to. They not never have to, or just they never do engage in non-virtue. Well,
no, yeah. Tade pedere doa. Chanju semba shenlia mikiwa jurgi yune chanju semba kewan jurgi ores pekares ne. Pena chanju semba ningji chembu sheshawa. Chanju Semba, Ningji Chimbus, Minkora, Ningji Chimbus, Yosara, Depend to Gurbas, Tuzin Tanganke Pombo, Tangema in the Tuzin Tangje, Lungi Chichen, Mimambo, Tai Kamzulaki, and Norwood, the second to Yora. Tindekedwa. Ningji Chimbus, Depend to Gurba Shiki, Chanju Semba, Naja, Sokbar Gurba. Redway, Chanju Semba, Naja, Sokbar Gurba, Severan Debe, Debin Kumbushi, nobody chick Jala Mabuki on it to Zina shoot again, Chanju Semba Nabia, so you're in Burwa. Oh, Debin Kumbushi, then Kumachiki. Oh, that is a Kanga said to the Nachala, the Kanga Young do some Kokanga say go some local say a touch error. Oh, Depajo, Debin Ningchimbo. Singing the Hakone. Oh, Dako de Sena, Chanju Sembataga de Set, the Bachisa, Kora Yawa, Tundri Kazakas in Yawa Tunganyango. Tiletangara, Kosashan, and Yawakin Tunganyango came and do. Tako Chanju Semanga de Sena, the Cotinent, Tiba Shibisane, Tunga Shibishango, calling Jetan, the Marisam, and the Kosashara. So Tunga, Yawakin, I guess, and the cotton Mabuda Senada. And I could do what she was at Tunga, younger son, calling Ninjim Bashi Kunelane, Sayora. What is the cook on your Gora? Oh, dear.
So the example here is of the Bodhisattva, this material in the brackets. That's not in the actual Tibetan. So it's here where it says, it is like the following analogy: a Bodhisattva called Mahakaruna. Was a captain. A captain of a ship. These sailing vessels would go out in search of treasure to bring back, and so Geshe actually mentioned this example previously when he was talking about that as merchants or as business people, we can approach that with the proper motivation. Then it goes as a bodhisattva activity, and so just like these 500 bodhisattvas are going out, they're actually doing business, right? So it just depends upon your motivation. So they're going out to find all this wealth and bring it back, and so then the bodhisattva captain, or sometimes, well, he was kind of he was steering and in charge of the ship anyway. So then he used a short spear to slay a pirate captain who intended to kill a group of 500 bodhisattvas on board. So then what is going on here is that the bodhisattva captain understood that this person this pirate captain was going to slay all these 500 bodhisattvas, and then he took into consideration that this person with that kind of a, if you want to call it a misdeed or a sin, it's a serious misdeed here, and the result of a group of 500 killing 500 bodhisattvas is so serious that the bodhisattva could say, well, could see that this person, if he did like that, would suffer for an incredibly long period of time in the hells and undergo such suffering for so long. And he said, wow, look, if I take his life and prevent him from doing that, then it's okay for me if I go to hell, and so I can suffer the result of this. So I'll just so out of a really strong, and this is somebody who had a very strong, pure motivation of compassion for this person, then he took his life.
Oh yeah. Keban bumdu koala jabji chok bara sheba shinos ene keban bumdala koala kemme ko atende kewata kewa lapchim besabare songdwa kezo ko nganzo Chanju Sambatinde, young land of the Trout and the Kulation Gyora, or the Zoet, Ninji Kunelane, and the Tiba Mambusa get a duty to up to Zupa, Jomelia, Neg of the Loco, Sawa Ninji Kunu, Ninji Kunela, and the Gokado de la Troa that's a Bupaju to jump to get number 10 today on Gyora.
So, he thereby turned his back on 100,000 aeons of cyclic existence. The merit that he attained through doing this was such that he didn't have to undergo rebirth in hundreds of thousands of aeons of cyclic existence. So then we can see from this example then that we have the bodhisattvas like that are manifesting as wrathful deities in a wrathful form and as a wrathful deity to prevent others from creating great misdeeds or serious misdeeds or grave misdeeds, maybe we can say, or sin that causes them to be reborn into suffering situations for a long time. So they have this motivation of a strong sense of compassion, and then they show this very fierce aspect to turn others away from such serious misdeeds. Okay, so now we're on this second section of this how to practice the bodhisattva deeds, and it's the merit of generating the altruistic intention or the altruistic spirit of enlightenment, and it has two sections. One is the merit in generating the first ultimate altruistic intention, and then specific merit of causing others to generate the altruistic intention.
Oh yeah, that is my login. Chanju Samba Sem Dangbo Sigdwa. Sudden Joe Tamje Geshe. Kolo Gurua, Nin Gurua, Teda Sonam Lege Pass. And they turned on Besem Gibe Sonam Sigdwa, turned on Besem Gesuza, Tomba Yungusum to Tobeshi, the Latin Sem Gesiora. Tomba Yungusum to Tobeshi, the Latin Sem Gesiora. Oh, they gave a Sonam Siora. Kunzup Sem Gesudung and the Sem Jetamjek to Sanje Yukovan Tobarsha, Nambe, Namjung and the Chanju Sem de la Kunzup Sem Gesiora. Kokare says Sem Jetamjelia, Chute and Tomgengi, Kyonkuse, Yonde Kundengi. Division Gurachari is the Kunzubekula Megiora, the Kunzu Sem Gesiora. Tanda de Tandamba Tomba Yungusum to talk with Chambasonza, Tandamba Megiora, Tandam Sem Ges Labshara.
So, when we're going to be talking here about two different types of the spirit of enlightenment, the ultimate spirit of enlightenment, and the conventional spirit of enlightenment, or ultimate altruistic intention, and conventional altruistic intention. The difference is just what is the object of the what is the object of one the ultimate spirit of enlightenment. The object is it's really a wisdom or a knowledge consciousness that's knowing emptiness directly. You know, it's a direct experience of emptiness. That's called the ultimate spirit of enlightenment. It's a direct perception of emptiness. So then here, then the conventional one is really the the spirit of enlightenment that we know more, which would be, you know, I'm for the sake, for the welfare of all sentient beings, I'm going to attain Buddhahood. So that you're, because the object of that is conventional, it's not ultimate, then it's called the conventional spirit of enlightenment.
Oh yeah, tambu tambe sim tambu jebe sonam ne sigwa. Chanju semban de kangne sonde tambe chanju semba sheja shena. Tambe chanju sem sena tomba ni musum do toba tcherwa. Tambe chanju semba sena sa tambu tomne phagbe kansa de zolia. ene tambe chanju semba sigwa. Takba chembe sa tambu ne ya. Sang jeje pato sang ma jeje patela. ene tambe chanju semba sigwa.
So when are such bodhisattvas known as ultimate bodhisattvas? After they have attained the first ground. So it's here, the ultimate spirit of enlightenment is this direct experience of emptiness. And when do we experience that? On the first ground of the bodhisattva. So then the first ground then. So then that person that bodhisattva who has that experience is actually a noble bodhisattva, or a superior bodhisattva, or people have different ways of translating, or an Arya bodhisattva. Then, so that bodhisattva then is known, that bodhisattva is also known as an ultimate bodhisattva.
Chanju semba sem dambo se chanju semba dambe chanju semba sigora. Ane sem dambo sa dambo tobe tomba ni ngusum do tobe sa dambo tobe te sigora. Chanju semba sem dambo o te dabo sem dambo tomba ni ngusum do tobe ishi di chanju sembe kyule ke sona sigora. Ane panyo kare yoresana sa den kyo tamje ge kolo gyoba nye gyoba sai ting na yebe simje samma tamje de kolo gyube kyabule gyurjige sonam jiyor wase o te sonam le jane halbe sonam sagre se te sigdo sadim kyo tamje ne kolo gyuba nye gyurwa tada sonam le kyapase tongba ningosum do to na tongba ningosum do to be phe sonam kaje sagre sene chanju sembatlia sadim ge kyo tamje kolo gyube kyabu gyurwe sonam jiyor tele halbe sonam sagre se te shegdo de.
So the first verse here, I mean the verse 106 then says the merit of bodhisattvas with the first intention far exceeds that which would make all beings on earth become universal monarchs. So the question here is, what kind of merit would such bodhisattvas who have this direct experience of emptiness, or direct perception of emptiness, or direct knowledge of emptiness, what kind of merit is it that they have? So if you took all their merit, okay, that bodhisattva on this first ground if you took their merit far exceeds that which would make all beings on earth become universal monarchs. So that it would exceed if you took the merit that it would take for each and every living being on earth to become universal monarchs, or universal rulers, then the merit for that bodhisattva far exceeds that kind of merit.
Dan dreba de logo da. Te yönden ge kebar neyse dan be chanju sem de kebe yönden penyu ka zersina. Chanju sembe dan be sem dangbo kebe. Chanju sembe dan be sem dangbo kebe sonam neyse sonam ka zersina. Sonam kangshi nyawara sakbe ling shibe takbo kolo gürbe kebur gürbe sonam che mangnas mi chik lingshi zambuling chibu memberwa ane sharlo no jayube ling shigalo wangenge kolo gyube kebun gyurji mi chik gyurega sonam kaje sagore esgora o di dedabi sonam sai tingna yebe kebo simje sangma tamje kolo gyube kebulun gyurji sonam 미치 콜로링 실로왕게 콜로교에 개부 유래선은 데 망부로와서 쳔부로와서 텔레장 사된 교 용조 링실로왕게 콜로교에 개부로 유로이나 계선남 될 유지기 선남 될 삶에바 용거로와서라 어 텔레장 학배 아니 동반인 것음도 또서나 텔레 학배 선남 사그레스 셰도 사된 게 개부 탐제 데르교에 선남 망와 따지며 나르셰베 선남 되네 사dengi 겨우 탐제네 콜로 규르베 규르와 니도 규르와 대다게 손음레 체 개발도 파소스.
So the commentary clarifies this in the following. The special features of their good qualities are as follows. If the accumulated merit through which one person becomes a universal monarch, ruling the four continents is great. That means ruling the whole of the earth. Sometimes we just say universal monarch. It's really like ruling the universe. So then the merit that one person needs to rule the whole universe is so great. Okay, then there's no need to mention that the merit required for all beings on earth to do so, each and every being to be these universal rulers, would be so much greater, right? Then, but for the merit of a bodhisattva who has generated this first, this direct realization of emptiness, and actualized this first ground, is so much is so much greater, far exceeds the merit that would make all beings on earth to become universal monarchs.
뭐야? 콜로 주베 개버스는 지고 또 지중자 망부 연구도 와. 콜로 저 소남 경계 콜로를 시체 다 등사에는 남주서 같은데 인지라. 내가 그 콜로체 디나는 코란 뿡다. 코란도 뿡 강ገ념도 로셔도. 아니 버저 롱바들 랩도사 그 롱바 코란 마 잠매거네. 마 샴니 자기 인도도 샴마도 마 전에 샴매거네 그 왕도 또 통경이 된데 요새요라. 그 콜로 주르 개보세. 마 잠매세고 말해. 된데 실수도.
So there are many different, what do you say, great and smaller universal monarchs, but the universal monarch has this special quality of having these some kind of a wheel weapon. It seems that it's more like airplanes. So because they could transport with this wheel, transport their army to overcome an enemy or anybody in any direction, and but they wouldn't overcome through violence. Just they would, look very violent, look, and frightening, and just through that their appearance in that place with this army, then they would be able to subdue whoever it was that they were seeking to subdue.
This one? Oh yeah. Talk about this one.
The Bedera.
Bedera. No. Oh, that Penasidoa, the Bedera. Pena Kiabu Diltane, Ribe number Chevane, Normambo, Nindue Coin Bashinose. Oh, did that the Peditiredua. Pena Kiabutoso, Neme Kiabutosoke. Oh, Narabtunja Sanichi Kangami Yongo. Gebu tenechik chimda tinde Geshe Yusara. Oh, the Lapsaneko, Timche, Timche, Pesha Dusa, Pesha Ducheneko, Normambo, Duek, Corresigora. Penakebu, Tiljanes, Tiljas to Tira. Oh, Sanimikanga Yongo, Tim Mangusha, Geshe. Any Ribbon number chip, oh, Dick Keran Dichem, the Keranti Dichem, and the Dichevan D and Dilichevan Diusiora. Normambo, you don't do it. Going by Shinoku, Norchala Mambun Duegi, Corresigora. No, going by Shinos. Oh, deep petty. Tiredwa.
And so then
Tandam Chanju Sem Gesuno Sonamundo Yongres, Sagres, Penajabuti, Janaco Tim Jessidu, Norman Bundo, Corre de Duas, or Dinash special.
So the example illustrates how a bodhisattva at this level then accumulates an incredible amount of merit, and so it's just like a king. This is a king with great power, right? Issued an edict which made it easy to know what was permitted and not permitted, and this brought the king great wealth. So it just that. The king, what do you say, accumulated by giving this edict, and he made it so that he could accumulate a great amount of wealth.
Oh yeah, Tadilia Jebadinal. Kachi Kunzu Badan Sudo, Tandambe Chanju Sembe Keban Machebar Sigdwa. Tandambe Chanju Sembasno, Tomba Yungusum, the Tos Hagen Chanju Semba Kangala, Tandambe Chanju Semba Sigdwa. Kunzu Basidazan go Tomba Yungusum, the Madon Chanju Sembatozola, Kunzu Be Chanju Semba Sigdwa. The Kunzu Badan, Tandambe Chanju Sembe Kebar Macheba Ches, or a Keba Chemashim Kajigi. Oh, Tandambe Chanju Semba, Tomba Yungusum, the Togre Satan Butobore. The Maimba Cholamba said, Chanju Semba Maresana. Oh, the Mandiri take us aggress on Giora. Don't be Chanju Sembe Kebar Machebar, the Kebar Chegure. Tanda de Sonia, the Tandambe Chanju Semba Sonam and the Tops on Giore. And now Kunzu Tandambangusum, the Madon Chanju Semba Solam Cholamba Yore. Tezo Chanju Semba Res, or Mado, Could Chanju Semba Mare, Chanju Semba in it, Tombangusum to talk with Tandambe Chanju Semba Yangur Siora. Oh, the Mandibresura. So say Joyena. Chanju Semba Seniba member Devane, Tigbe Pudu Choimbe, Chime Tawashin the Toajo, or Society Yena, Chanju Semba Regi Mare, Seniba Regi Mare, Chanju Semba Yena, Tandambe, Chanju Semba Pakbe Kansa in Gurisena, Tigbasagi or City, Mares or whatever.
So, in this next paragraph, the commentators distinguishing a misconception or a wrong, a misunderstanding, where it says some failing to differentiate between the attributes of a conventional and ultimate, between the attributes of conventional and ultimate bodhisattvas, claim that if they are common beings, they cannot be fully qualified bodhisattvas. So a conventional bodhisattva, and well, we know what an ultimate bodhisattva is. An ultimate bodhisattva is somebody who's on the path of seeing, has reached the first ground. So then these conventional bodhisattvas are on the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. Out of the 5 paths, there would be the first 2 paths. They're not on the 3rd path. So some would then say that if a person is a common being, okay, so somebody who hasn't, until you reach this path of seeing and reach the first ground, then you're still a ordinary person or common being, if you want to say that. So these people say, well, if they're common beings, then they couldn't possibly be a fully qualified bodhisattva. What they're thinking is that a fully qualified bodhisattva is only these ultimate bodhisattvas, and so they're not. These aren't real bodhisattvas. The ones on the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. So this is really a grave misdeed to think like that. So it should be thrown out like a gob of spittle.
Oh yeah. This one.
Because they.
Oh yeah, that did it. This one.
Lua the.
Oh, there. Chimete was in the Tadari, Dorajawas, this one. That the society says, society or the Pagwas Kansalin and Dondra. Yana society or Yana Pagbe Kansara. Pagbe Kansas, the Tombanisum to Tosana Pagbe Kansas. Tombanisum to Madonge, Solam Jonaba, the Naranzo Lamashokanga, society or did you let the young?
So you're either an ordinary person or a noble being. Okay, there's this distinction. So, once you reach this state of the first ground, then that person is known as a noble being, and so they're distinguished from anybody up to that point. They don't necessarily, it means like ourselves and anybody up to that point, and those persons are called ordinary persons, I guess we could say. I don't use common. Here it's saying common.
Yeah. Tada yori continue machines. Society was Sierra. Society was in Garcia, so Sigara. Garan, Yomogi Shamando, some Condruce and Aja Tradoce, Tiwangele, Dramendasane, and a Koyatung in Yonge de Yora. Society was a Sosoge, Lang and Basane, Sosogi Tulichange Sigara. Soso took a song, meters, Simjet, Society was Sigara. Pagbe Kansas, the Pagbe Kansas, Tomba Yingusum to Torama. Tomba Yingusum to Tortus, Yamogi Shaman to Yomare. Yamogi Shaman to son the lesser Yomare. Quape and Jig lesser Yomara. Chazang Razo Tantapata, but those society or social Lang and Basan, social Dulisha de Yora. Tele Cabar to Pagwasura. Pagbe Kansas to Zoge. Yamogi Shaman to son the Quape and Jig lesser Yomara. Or dig Pagbe Kansas Yora. Did you let me know?
So this distinction between ordinary and noble beings, if we want to use those translations, then or superiors and common beings, common persons and superior persons, this distinction is made based upon, well, the Tibetan word is sosogyeba, means like an individual. Soso really means like individual being or something like that, and the idea is that under the power of the afflictions, our attachment and hostility and ignorance and so forth, then we're creating our own the karma that keeps us in cyclic existence, and so we're really just bringing about our own trouble. We're bringing about our own trouble through our individual actions. So we're just sort of always, cycling back, helplessly cycling back into cyclic existence, into samsara, if we want to use that word. And so then the whereas the noble beings are well, it's another way of thinking about the noble beings is that they're exalted and they're above, they're sort of outside of that. Okay, they no longer create because they've no longer under the influence of under the power of their afflictions. Then they don't create this karma that what is it called? The throwing karma is one of the, or projecting karma. It's a certain type of karma that projects another life into another life within samsara. So they're outside of the Geshe's hands were great. You see, got these individual common beings cycling around here, and these other, what do you say, noble beings who are just outside of that whole cycle. Everybody's caught in this little cycle over here. They're over here. That's really what Pakpa means. It's just sort of outside of, lifted above or outside of that. Well,
that's why. Taniba Dirda Tindisma, Taniba Shen, some Keto Chuba, Sonam Jekever Sigua.
Okay, the Druid dancer?
Oh, yeah, to do it. Oh, they are not to the channel.
How much?
Oh, we have about 8 minutes.
About 8 minutes. Maybe we could answer questions in 8 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Dutse that's Yode, Kaman. Yeah, Yode.
Oh, and it is generally.
So we had some questions. And so maybe we'd take this 8 minutes to answer those questions. Yeah, somewhere in here. Yep, there we go. I think I very cleverly put one in my pocket, hopefully. No, I didn't. I don't know what I did with that. Maybe it's over here. Too many pockets, too many places. So, okay, so this question is, the mind has a subtle form that takes life after life. What is this subtle form? Is it the basis of designation of the mere I that goes from life to life? Then sem tramo did gewa ne gewa kasa gundu drogi oro gunchi gewa ne gewa la drogi ore did sem tramo de karade did kasa ngadsam ki dakshi rebe ngadsam ki
yeah this is the way
did
oh sem tramo de kangre se to the way oh yeah de ngadsam ki dakshi rebe serbe oh yeah sem tramo se tira pena nganzu tanda mi ki chik to ne de do kado da yip da chi mi de so de sem rakba se yora 다들 신루지산 셈도서 강가도 봐 매버셔라 미기 통야요 마람저 통야요 마르 첸데 나와 강가 제루라 제루레 테네고 나와 칼람바세 치 나와 담메다 샤주어라 나와 카르보다 같은 데도 치 당아제네 나와 담메다 샤주어레 에샤네 타마들려고 나와 에네 셈 타우시네 나와 담메다 강가 매버세 셈 타우시 버루실리아테는 가서 쇼게 가보 남당대는 토랑에 남거시라 동상 어딘데시 동사시오라 어딘나시 천대 나와 강가높 저지마게 풍불때 나와 셔주디에 매버셔 에팅이 버르들 선배 당보 동반인구 숨도 떠보나신 잡으여셔라 저 동상 이유 강가 나와 강가 높소네 참모신 주요라 들었음 참모시기요라 당간준 저대도 어딘 주요레시오라 셈락바드 매버셔네 강가 매타차차차신 나온다면다시 디제니 겨시마야 겨란스티나 판도샤요라 된도네니야 류차야시던 데소네니야 미기치 통해야다 암조 퇴야다 식tin데레니야 소아 제용거와 어디래 셈참무시겨라 셈참무데 dag dakshir베스네 dag dakshira 강사게 dakshir와 다 셈참무데 유도 강사요라 가바 다기르스네 셈참무데 다기요라 단다 강사 당실로 소부요레 소아요레 셈담멘다요르 망부요라 오다 참무레데 강사 dak시들 셈참무데 때네 강사 다기요라
So the subtle form of the mind is we have very coarse mental activity going on with our senses and our thoughts and so forth, and all the different appearances in this life, and then at death, what happens is that we go through a disillusion in various stages. This is in the described in tantric teachings, where you eventually what's going on is the mind is getting more and more subtle, and the appearances are getting more and more. We're going through various stages of appearances that then finally at one point you have this clear light appearance that is said to be like the dawn, early. It's really like the first light of dawn, or I don't even know if we can use the word dawn. It's just the first light and the earliest light that comes in the early morning, and so that is indicative of this very subtle state of mind, or this very subtle mind. Okay, and then that subtle mind is what the continuity or continuum of that mind is what then takes again the aggregates in the next lifetime, and so then you have again all these very coarse states of mind that evolve from that subtle state of that subtle mind. And well, is that the basis of designation for the mere I? Well, that's the person. We call person based upon the mind and body, and so at that point, when the mind gets to that very subtle state, then that serves as the basis of designation for the person or the I, or however you want to, or the self or whatever. Then ordinary people have a fear of death, but also of the process of dying. For example, pain or difficulty breathing. And so what is most useful at that time for those helping the dying person? Chiwala shenan kegi ores. You know, konso yang de shiwi drawdown de la shegi ore de natsa dangi de den konso ten kapo de be shegi ore. Then ben shenan kegi ore. Then that's a consola rock jena dene countries rock jego de kare yagade de du kon shenan kege du dene kare jego de du pemba kare jego de consola pen double cheat je kogi
more dako chigala molia mi kanga de shena chai chiga chebe ngeba yuki marwa Kangade shena chigi timar khashade jamden di chelle labu che tonge yungudwa yore dako shena che deko karjeni shena chigi ne shidage ha ko maro u tang tu ma du da tinde cheni ko dunge chi nyang yora chiwe dunge de yung yora tang ka bu chedo shede chi yung yora uti de dako karsore nanda che che chung ta ye ne ka shi ma ko samlu ta ye ka bi na da labjere kapche chik tos che yordo pembere chi tos mato eto ko chigala ma tos u tanya khabu che de ko taga da yungu ra ta ko des sengora nyangora ma to chi ti meb so cha yo mara ta because I made of tang suk cha na nazi tang ne suk ma chung ta ya de je ne ya bo da kasha ya de khabre jab je ko मैं चंबो दांजे पे नमसन ड्रेस हो सकता है शी हो सकता है तेने यहाँ चौक मारवा से शब्द चाहिए वाला
so it's well, not everybody's going to have this kind of reaction. Some people are just very peaceful at the time of, even during the process of dying, that they're very peaceful with it, but some people it's difficult for them. Well, if they're what you could do is give them helpful advice. If they're at that point they're receptive to helpful advice before it gets too difficult for them. It's natural though that the breathing is going to be at some point is going to be very difficult, so. But if there's a lot of pain, then pain, certainly pain medication to alleviate pain at that time is helpful. But what you don't want to do is over-medicate. I think that there is the possibility of giving that person something that would help them die quicker. Okay, so you don't want to do that. You don't want to, give them something that would, help them die quicker through over medication or however. You just sort of want to just make it so that it helps them with their pain. There's sort of a natural difficulty of breathing and so forth that happens at the time of death. So and if they're receptive, then you could give them some advice.
다고 소여배 값이 지내려와. 소라여배 제 최근 남주 최근 삼로 여행뱀 같은데 이나. 아니 그 다처럼 섭섭지 개도 지금 말이대. 이나 그 최근 삼로도 군절로 쏘았다. 베니치다 잠바콤 니지콤 야치지콤 제 치외 땅안에 시전 그 치외를 벌야 방황적 용해야 된다 요라. 다처럼 디질 디용그리 디질 디용그리 저런 삼로 섭섭 땅고도 섭섭 지쇼아스 라기도와. 에코라게 오세 섭섭 지기도와. 나중에 마치 나중 개개에서 오라. 코란 통성아. 아니 나중 부 충주리 하고 말아. 전에 그 로바 코란 전에 지버시티기 라기도와. 다처럼 섭섭 지아세. 직전에 그 지금 말이네 저런 섭섭 지아. 저런 개를 랑글라마키 쏘았다와. 아니 시간을 맞다 안 된대 연구해봐 당분된대 연구해봐 되는데 연구해봐 되는데 된대 삼로 동시 와서 굴라기도 와 그래서 가르쳐서기나 삼부충 주라 그게 나세 거기야 다는도 와 당분에 선배님이 레레 다다를 당하세 아니 그 섭섭치에서 섭섭치에 배로 안나 세마송 배든데 삼로 당하지는 그 정서 자그 삼로 당하지네 저기 랍자를 캡 도저 둘이 지쇼 제 다든데 삼로동 삼로션다 마부마다 세워라 다고 시그레스 셰동게든데 있나 시그마레 저런 나다면도 단다 그게 지금 말에 저런 자사레스 세워라 마도 시그레스 단고 샤나처럼도 되어 말아
so if they're able to, they're in a state where they're receptive to advice and they have some kind of, interest in the Dharma, then it's possible to give them advice that time that helps them to become more peaceful. And what you want to avoid is, though, to, sort of say, "Oh, you're going to die," and make them really afraid. You don't want to do that. So you try and give them helpful advice, and then when I was very young, I was just a young kid, so I didn't know what was going on. But my teacher then was dying, and I was watching.
그러나 기계 미드 랩송아. 그러나 기계 전기 두개 했어. 전기 두서 가르치지 미드 랩도 하고. 그래서 저기도 와.
And Gemma remembers it, somebody who was attending him saying, "Do you remember your name?" He said, "Oh yeah, my name's this," and he could still answer at that time what his name was, and so then he's like slowly. So the people who were advising him, "Oh, be careful, be very careful now, be very careful, and you reach this state, and then you're going to reach that state," and sort of laying it out for him. And he was he was being agitated, and then when he heard this, then Gela remembers as a young child seeing him get very peaceful, and then he was able to die peacefully. Then is it more important to take the Bodhisattva's vows as soon as one feels ready, or is it important to wait until one feels a connection to a particular teacher and then take them with that teacher? Janchu Sembe Domba Korla de Janchu Sembe Domba Kadu Lango de Janchu Sembe Domba Lang Chocho Yin Yimbe Dutsa de Yagare de Shenda de Lama Chik Rangi Gegend and Lama Drawat Yabu Chik Sutsane and Domba Lango Gagi Yagade.
No, de Chitanko Chanju Sembe Domba Lambala Tambo Chanju Sem Kegura, Mesem Kegura, Mesem Kebash Koyara, Chanju Simba Tombangone Tola, Mesem Kegosiara. Chanju Simja Tamjik Sanjako Tobachagi, Samzati, some Dishuk Chimbush Koyara. O de you engage in any teacher, Chanju Simba Tombalangiora. The Chanju Simba Tombalandu, Lama the Tendre Kundina Langiora. Do you know things I need Chanju Simagin and Chanju Simba Tomba Langiora, Penakundu Sunju Nansuna. Some change some taking down some Mabacha, some jet object on down Sanjako Tokin, Tobachagis, Chendu, some Tigado. A teacher, Chitangun Jitishi, Chanju Samba Namdi, Chanju Sembe Tombason, and Labjatus country lobby 19 near Terinias on the Chanju Sembe Tomba looking his Chendu Cheche, Namaka Chendu Cheche, Jubitoba Langidoa. There's money at the Kemena. Changes in Betomangone did it give you men Kabure de Inako, Teta Paxara, Teta Chess to Bachetogiora. Mutindera. Only Tobala Mersim Kegura. Taina Mersim Mavache Mersim Gemma mine was the Nanga Shuki Squara Mersim. That's your log sometimes should capture church at Germany. Germany, and then Chanju Sembala Machikundin, Juktum Lana de Yora. And it is with us also some time. Changes in Thomas when it's sitting the or in the young Jordan and the Yora.
In fact, in order to take the Bodhisattva vow, one needs to have first generated an uncontrived aspirational spirit of enlightenment. So that uncontrived means you don't have to think about it. It just comes automatically that you want, in whatever you're doing, it automatically comes that you're doing that in order to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all, for the welfare of all beings. So, but nowadays it's not really like that. For instance, in His Holiness's teachings, he'll have us saying some verses to generate the aspirational spirit of enlightenment, and then based once we've done that, then the next step is to recite these verses where you're actually taking the engaged. You're taking the Bodhisattva vow, which is generating the engaged spirit of enlightenment. So then, and then after you've done that, if you recite, on a daily basis, there's a certain recitation that you do to take the vow, and so if you continue to recite that, then what you're really doing is to really have the Bodhisattva vow. It's sort of like, are you really getting the Bodhisattva vow or not? Are you really taking the vow or not? To really have it, you have to have this uncontrived spirit, aspirational spirit of enlightenment. But what we're doing is we're creating propensities for doing that in the future, and so it's I forget the exact translation, but it's like the Bodhisattva vow. It's similitude. That's the word. Thank you. You're generating a similitude of the Bodhisattva vow, but it's not really the actual Bodhisattva vow. But there's nothing wrong with that. So I mean, it's just you're generating the propensities for having that actual vow in your future life. That Riso, oh yeah. So that's is the time also up? The questions are up and the time. Yang is also.